So, how are you?
Oh, I'm fine. How are you?
I'm good. Can you hear me good?
Yeah.
Cool. I got a new microphone today, so I'm not wearing the headset tonight.
Cool.
All right. So, are you excited for tonight?
Yeah. So, I know I really like Ensign Ro as a character. So,
You do. Why?
um, so, I don't know. She's cool. She's a badass. She always says what she thinks. Um, that is pretty much it. Um, I noticed one. So I know one of my favorite episodes with her was actually like, even though it's not the same actress, Rascals, where they turn them into like, where they, four of the crew members get turned into little kids, and I thought that was a kind of a cute episode because she kind of got to experience some of the childhood she missed. So.
That's nice. Yeah. I mean, the Bajorans in general didn't really have a good childhood, did they?
No, no, they
Because the
didn't.
Cardassians were literally trying to make them work and be pretty much live in destitution and be servants and laborers and everything.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah, that would pretty much put a damper on anyone's childhood.
Yeah. At least a very different one.
It was. And you know, that really prompts, Ensign Ro is what prompted me to make the topic that I did. How do our origins affect our lives? What are your thoughts on that?
Um, so I know that that's a, I don't know, maybe probably interesting conversation for most people.
It
So
is.
I know I had a um, interesting childhood just because it was like, oh, there's Star Trek, and then I know I was um, I don't know, I was a nerd before being a nerd was cool. So I some of those experiences were not as pleasant as
Yeah.
um but and then there was like also uh I grew up in a Baptist church, so there was like a lot of conflicting stuff there. it
Hmm.
was like it was like evolutionary science, and
Yeah.
so and then I know when I after I left, I could kind of choose the life I wanted. It kind of went a little crazy, and then I kind of, as a friend would say, recalibrated back to the middle a little bit. But yeah,
But basically, you didn't let your origins define who you became.
no. In some ways, it still does. I mean, but it's because you always have doubts. It's like, am I?
Are you good enough? Is that what you're trying to get at?
Mhm. um, did I go too far? Etc.
Yeah. You know, I'm sure that we all wonder, are we good enough to do certain things in our lives? And we always have that inner doubt based on experiences we have. And I'm sure That's what Ensign Ro felt. I mean, we may not be in control of all our experiences, and some experiences come to us by choice, but we are always in control of how we respond to things, you know?
Right.
And our origins do not have to define what we do when we are old enough to choose for ourselves. Yeah.
So, I mean, yeah, we're free to choose how we think are is best to live our lives. Kind of puts it into a interesting content. I think he had mentioned was it preemptive strike as
Yes.
another conversation topic, just because I think in that episode she did kind of let her origins define her a little bit in there. So I had actually meant to watch that episode before tonight, but I didn't.
Well, the homework's never required. I enjoy it when people prepare, but it's never required. But yes, preemptive strike, you know, she couldn't pretend to be something she wasn't. And, you know, she was Bajoran at heart, and she felt like she couldn't leave her family defenseless. That's why she did what she did. She was never Federation born. She was always Bajoran. Yeah.
So it'd be interesting to compare Ensign Ro's character with Major Kira, just because I know they have a somewhat similar origin. I think Major Kira was more of a freedom fighter than Ro was, but it was just interesting watching the progression of both characters. I think Ensign Ro was originally supposed to be on Deep Space Nine, and I think she was supposed to be Major Kira at some point, or she couldn't get on to, for whatever reason, the actress couldn't get on to or wouldn't do Deep Space Nine, and that's where Major Kira came from. But
right. And it's interesting, you know, I mean, Major Kira and Ro were both Bajorans, yes, but they did lead different lives. Ensign Ro watched her father be tortured to death by Cardassians. But Kira Nerese's mother became the comfort woman of a Cardassian, Gul Dukat in particular. So would you do that? Like, would you say they're similar, knowing that?
No, not really. I mean, I think they're two very different characters, but it's just, I mean, just their how they were treated and abused by the Cardassians were similar. I'm not sure if Major Kira would make the same choice that Ensign Ro did in preemptive strike. I mean, especially after having worked with Sisko and crew for so long. So, I mean, initially she kind of had trouble breaking from that in the first season, but like in later seasons, she kind of, does.
She was more about principle and behaving honorably. She wasn't, I mean, she did what she had to survive. And then when she came to know that, hey, the Federation's actually here to help and be helpful. And when Cardassia, she was in trouble, she was all about behaving honorably and not leaving people to die just because. Like when that one Cardassian was killed, she came to realize that she couldn't just hate Cardassians just because they were Cardassians, that she had to have any take on morality.
Right.
What do you think about that?
You ask hard questions.
I know. I had training in communications and 15 plus years in journalism. Of course, I ask hard questions, and I delight in asking hard questions and really making people think.
um,
And if you don't have the answer right now, that's okay. You can dwell on it. We can talk about it after the episode too. If you don't tell me, that's cool.
okay.
Oh, we have another visitor who's warped in to join us. Dan Lecky. Hello, Dan Lecky. Welcome to Club IDIC. I am Captain Heather. I hope your stay is comfortable.
Hello.
Hello. Hello. Dan Lecky.
Oh, hello.
How are you?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Ah, cool.
Welcome to Club IDIC. I am Captain Heather. I hope your stay here is comfortable.
Hello.
Hello. Welcome to the club.
Yeah, I can't remember how you reply because I basically just woken up. Live long and prosper. Peace and long life. The Ensign Ro. Is that the episode being watched?
Yes, it is.
Cool. Will there
It
be others
most-
joining?
What?
Will there be others joining us? Are you not sure?
Who?
Did you hear me?
Yeah, what did you say?
I was saying, will there be others joining us? Do you know?
Hopefully.
Ah,
Usually we have small crowds, but hopefully someday we'll get bigger crowds. But do you have any thoughts before we start the episode? We usually give a few minutes to let people come in.
cool.
Do you have any thoughts on Ensign Ro or preemptive strike before we start Ensign Ro? Because we do discuss a bit.
Who are you asking?
You.
Oh, right. Well, I was just remembering having sent a question to Larry Nemechek for the Star Trek magazine, official Star Trek magazine, and that was published and with a picture of Roladin from Ensign Ro. I was just remembering that just now.
Okay.
And how it was the first episode to feature the Bajorans, I guess.
Okay. Well, yeah. Any more thoughts?
That was just a couple of thoughts.
Okay.
for other for yours, Heather, or hi Jake. What are your thoughts on this episode?
What are my thoughts? So yeah, I enjoyed this episode. I know um, it was one of the, like you were saying, it's like one of the first episodes, or it's the first episode to feature the Bajorans. It's also one of the first episodes to feature the Kardashians, even though I think they had one or two other appearances before this. I think maybe just one, but um, so and then our first look at that conflict there. So how the Bajorans were treated, what kind of people the Kardashians were. Um, so it was kind of a first look into some of that, and it would define D Space Nine later on. So that was when this episode. So when I'm doing my rewatches and things, I always get excited when I see this episode, just because, yay, D Space Nine is coming soon. So,
That's awesome.
but
That is very awesome. So Dan Leckie, we also have a question for you. Are you there? I also attached a topic to this evening's discussion. I don't know if you saw that. How do our origins affect our lives? That's the topic I just attached to Ensign Ro. Do you have any thoughts on that? How do our origins affect our lives, who we become?
I thought it was a really interesting topic, and I did see it, and yeah, I thought it was very interesting. I wondered how you extrapolated that topic from the episode. And it was also just one, just thinking about the origins of the Cardassians and the Wounded and the Bajorans. The question that I asked Larry Nemechek was like about when did, because I hadn't watched this episode in a while, and it wasn't like immediately apparent to me, off the top of my head. But the question that I asked him was, when did the Bajorans sort of become, like when did the culture develop into embracing the religious aspect that is such a part of Deep Space Nine? Because I didn't remember it actually being part of Ensign Ro, and as he said in the question, and he gave like a whole page worth of answer to the question. It's not really part of Ensign Ro. It's not till later that aspect of the culture was defined and developed. Here it's seems a lot to do with like recovering from the occupation, and to do with like having blankets and stuff like that, like the basic needs of the people. So yeah, I guess as Jake was saying, it's like you get the first initial like view of the Bajoran people, but they're not, it's fleshed out as they'd become, I guess.
Well, yeah, and to answer your question, I got the topic about that from we don't have to let our origins define who we become.
Mm-hmm.
Because Ensign Ro was born in poverty in a sense, and she decided to become a Starfleet officer. And of course, she had her struggles there, but she didn't let them define her. And even with her rocky return, she decided to do right by it and came back. And of course, in preemptive strike, she decided to return to her roots and help defend her roots and protect them.
And
Still,
even leaving the Federation, the Starfleet.
She still tried to do good with what she had instead of just falling prey to her circumstance. So.
And I think a lot of people like bring up like, how come Riker like asks Ro to remove her like ceremonial earring, and yet like Worf is allowed to like wear like on the bridge his ceremonial sash.
Because Riker has an attitude, and he had an attitude. He was one of those that followed gossip. And
I
he had
think
an
there's
attitude
several
against
answers.
Ensign. He had an attitude against Ensign Ro, and he had an attitude problem. And he was clearly not ready to be a captain if he let a personal opinion go above his duty. And that's what it was.
Well, but I've seen like several answers to it, like it being speculated like maybe the earring is more of a religious symbol than the sash. There's quite a few like theories about why it is.
I don't know. But Riker clearly had an attitude problem with people based on rumors more than fact, and he needed to learn to stuff it. What do you think?
What do you think, Jake?
So yeah, I kind of agree with uh Heather on this one. So like so he did have an attitude, and actually a lot of people had an attitude with her too. And Picard a little bit, I think. I mean, it was really took Guinan to come to Picard and be like, yeah, she's my friend, and you will listen to what she has to say. So, but I don't know, some of the Starfleet, I think that was partly attitude, and then I don't know why Worf had that special dispensation that he did, but if there was a episode in Star Trek Voyager, I think it was like towards the end of the first season, where Tuvok actually got after the Bajoran on that was, I think she was like an ensign or something, but he got after her about the earring too. So
in Learning Curve, I think.
yeah, I think so. I don't know Voyager as well as the other shows, but
Really? Maybe we need to rectify that and have more Voyager episodes.
so I grew up with TNG and Deep Space Nine, and I didn't have access to Voyager growing up, so I didn't watch that until after I was an adult. So. And that was actually, I've seen like episodes here and there through like the 2000s and 2010s, and then it was really last year that I finally went back and saw all the episodes. But it's not like Deep Space Nine and Next Gen where I've seen the episodes like multiple times.
Well, as you say, it's never too late to start.
That's true. I saw my first episode, like a Voyager episode, when I was a child, and then I didn't really get back into Star Trek until I was an adult in my 20s. So. But yeah, I don't know. People in Star Trek are weird. They're just like people of this day. They play into rumor more than they do actual truths. They don't look at people's personalities. They pay attention to rumors and let rumors dictate how they feel about other people instead of looking what others have to offer the world. And it's disgusting.
Mhm.
So it's 30 minutes after the hour. Do you think we should get on with watching?
Sure. I know I'm gonna use the restroom real quick, so I'm gonna
Yeah,
might be a
all
minute
right.
or
So how about we just queue it up and then take that, and we'll just not come back for a bit, and then you can queue it up when you're done the restroom, and we'll just do it that way.
Okay, sounds good.
So I'll see you in a little while.
Okay.
Could you still hear me?
Yes, are you ready to queue it up?
I've got it queued up. I was just getting headphones, which I now have. So it's all
Okay, so that's what we're gonna do right now. Is that all right?
Yep.
Okay, so if you have any questions, just pop them in the chat.
Okay.
Okay, and I'll see you when it's over. And then we'll have a more of a talk. Maybe I'll have some thoughts to add after you watched it. See you in a bit.
See.
So what did you think? We can always talk and just Jake can pop in whenever he's ready.
Oh, I thought there was some like interesting parallels between Rolad and Tom Paris in backstory, and like the coming out of prison, joining the Starship crew, and then also like some parallels between like Kennelly and like Dougherty in Insurrection, a Admiral, as it were, as a lot of fans talk about.
But Kennelly probably didn't get himself stretched to death by the sonar.
Yeah, just gets himself in the court martial.
Hopefully, we never know really what becomes of him.
I wondered what the earliest Admiral there's been. Couldn't really think.
Well,
It's Forrest and Cornwell. I could remember like those as like quite early examples, and I thought like they're not really, they don't really do anything that bad that I can think of.
well, there have been corrupt captains and admirals and senior staff since the beginning of time. There was even a corrupt lieutenant in Enterprise who dared work for Section 31 and betrayed his own crew, if you remember.
Read, yeah. And yeah, also in this episode, I was thinking there's quite a few bits where it concentrates on sort of the lower decks of the Enterprise D, because you've got like not only Mott and also like Guinan, and yeah, I thought it was an interesting aspect of the episode. You know that line where there's a line of dialogue where it's Guinan who says like the only reason why anyone would come to 10 Forward is to socialize with other people. I've always like thought surely that's not right, because like it could, different people have different opinions. They could go there for like just a change of scenery, or it provides a bigger view of the stars or whatever.
I think Guinan was just, she could tell that Ensign Ro was out of her depth and alone. And, Guinan just, she senses special things about special people, hence the Elorian thing about her. And she could sense that Ensign Ro was special.
Yeah. And I've forgotten as well that the species is referred to in the plural as Bajora. It's obviously changed to Bajorans. I thought it's similar to like how Vulcans are referred to as what was it, Vulcanoid or something? I can't remember. No, Vulcanian, that's what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hi, Jake.
Hey.
Hi.
What'd you think?
I really liked it.
Cool. So does anybody have any additional things about the discussion question they want to talk about how our origins may or may not affect our growth or evolution as a person and our ability to manage life? And yes, I ask tough questions. That does not need to be repeated.
Watching the episode, I thought it's interesting that Picard comes to a point where he trusts, based on Guinan's word, Ro Laden to such an extent that he's like sees the potential in her at the very end, and goes along with her plan of like sort of remote controlling the is it Bajoran ship? Yeah, or like Orta's ship, supposedly, when it's really unmanned, but Rose suggested it. So taking on board her suggestions. I thought it was interesting.
Well, I don't know how much of Star Trek you've seen, but if somebody saves your life, quite literally, as Picard did for Guinan in a later episode, you pretty much trust them beyond all things and all people.
I've watched TNG like so many times.
Like,
but
we can reference Time Zero. It's okay. Like literally, Picard pretty much risked being left back in time. Yes, spoilers. Sorry, people. Picard literally risked being left in a time that was wrong for him to save the life of a woman he really didn't know. And that created a friendship that transcended beyond all time and all space. And that's amazing. And that's why Picard and Guinan are so close. And that's why Picard takes Guinan's word above all else, above all people, above all circumstance. That's why there's that level of trust, because Picard risked his life, risked his place in time, risked everything for that moment.
Well, I don't know. I guess this might be a spoiler, but yeah, I was just thinking like their story isn't finished yet, and like who knows what might come up in like next year.
Well, apparently, I guess I think it was it on the Whoopi show or whatever, The View? Picard went on The View and invited Whoopi to go, but I don't know if that actually happened.
Yes, that did happen.
I don't know if Whoopi Goldberg was actually on Picard season 2. We've heard so little about Picard season 2 except for little trailers.
Yeah, well, she's confirmed. I just don't think that they're like promoting it.
So they really haven't said too much about season 2 other than what was in the trailer and that Q's in it. That's
Yeah,
about
much more promoting the angle that Q's in it.
So I have
something that I need to bring up.
Oops, I did not mean for that to start.
I'm here with a formal invitation, and it's for you, Whoopi.
For me.
Alex Kurtzman, who is the senior executive producer of Star Trek Picard, and all of his colleagues, of which I am one, want to invite you into the second season.
Okay, View, don't punish us for playing something copyrighted on our little thing, please.
Oops,
We love
sorry.
it very much.
Sorry, I didn't actually mean for that to play. I was like,
No, that's okay. We played it. We're Star Trek fans. We make no money from this, so it should be okay as long as we don't profit from this, which we don't.
Sorry, I didn't.
It's fair use. It's fair use. It's on the internet. It's fair use, and we don't profit. So that's the laws, as far as I know.
Well, you can edit that part out.
No,
Sorry.
we don't have to. I don't think.
Well, so I had actually, the only thing I really intended on doing was finding the YouTube video and posting the link into chat. That's really all I had
That's
intended.
all right. That's okay. Anyway, so the discussion continues.
I was wondering if this is the first episode where you see Mott. I think it might be.
It might be the first and only episode we ever see Mott, because I don't recall if he ever popped up again. I know he got mentioned several times, but I don't know if he ever appears again, actually.
See who?
You know, the barber, Mr. Mott. Napoleon.
Well, you know what? That's an interesting thing to look up. And you know what? That's something we shall Google.
I looked up how many appearances the Cardassians had made before Ensign Ro, and it was just in The Wounded in season 4. And I was surprised by how late in the series Ensign Ro was, season 5.
Oh, he did appear other times, according to the Memory Alpha.
Cool.
So,
I thought he had. But was this his first time?
probably, but it's interesting. There's so many people on the Starship Enterprise that we never see.
Mm.
And y'all are better experts than me. How many people are actually on the Starship Enterprise?
How many people? Wow.
Yeah, did you know there are literally Bibles of the different shows?
I'm wanting to say some 800 to 1,000 maybe. Though that might
It's
be
over
low.
1,000.
Like I don't know if that's accurate. Actually, I don't know.
I remember it's over 1,000. I can't remember the exact number.
I don't know. Oh yeah, it was. That's just a little over 1,000. You're right.
It probably depends if you count like only because in some
Passengers.
statistics like they count only like Starfleet officers or like the complete crew, the complete everyone aboard, including all the civilians and kids and stuff.
And it's like all these people. And what did they do when the ship like literally went to the different planets in the Bajor area anyway, and the different Bajoran planets? Did they study them or something, or did they talk about them? Or because I'm sure they knew where the ship was going, right? Or did they just have no idea where the ship was going? Did they make shipwide announcements or what?
You know.
I don't know. What exactly do the civilians and other people not at duty stations do when the ship is having all these missions?
Have personal lives and socialize and stuff.
Well, see, that's what Star Trek Lower Decks is for.
That's true. That's true. Yes.
That's actually one of the reasons why I enjoy that show, just because you kind of get to, I mean, yeah, you have these like, in like, sorry, this is way off topic, but in like Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, Enterprise, you have like all these like big missions, and then you don't really get to see much of their like lives, I guess. How do these people actually live? I know it was funny, like yesterday I was doing laundry and I Googled, well, how do Starfleet crews do laundry? Because I was just kind of curious. I was like, do they have like automatic washing machines? Do they stick them in a replicator? And
do they recycle things? They must. Like we saw a little bit, like, sometimes Riker fought with his father when his father visited. They did that holiday. What is that thing called? That sport they did?
Ambu Jitsu.
And the suits.
mm-hmm.
But again, with the origins, he didn't get along with his father because his father basically abandoned him at 15 years old. I mean, how tragic is that? I mean, yeah.
Troubled relationship, that one.
What's with some of these Starfleet officers having like terrible, crappy parents? I don't know. I'm thinking of Picard all of a sudden. Like, have you read the autobiography of Jean-Luc Picard?
Mm-mm.
Like, I'm gonna go into it a little bit. I hope you don't mind, because I have. Like, I read about it. Like, Picard's mother died around like when he wasn't very old. He was an adult, but he wasn't very old. And he had a terrible relationship with his father, terrible relationship with his brother. But what is with Starfleet officers, some of them having terrible relationships with their parents, like Tom Paris, Ilana Torres? A lot of people had terrible relationship with their parents or lost their parents, and that contributed to their difficulties growing up and becoming adults and growing into adulthood and all that. Why is it written that way? And Wesley losing his father.
Kirk and the Star Trek movie. Well, I mean, that was a different universe, but yeah.
But still, he lost his father
Oh, yeah.
the day he was born. Yeah, but why is it that way? And how do you think this impacted them?
I was trying to remember. I think this is right. There was some, like, Gene Roddenberry, when he was growing up, had some like dispute with his dad. Yeah, because they believed differently about like religion and stuff. If I remember rightly. And of course, if you're talking about Wesley, well, Wesley was basically based on Gene Roddenberry to an extent, like Eugene Wesley Roddenberry.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's like, I don't know, just it's quite awful. I mean, how do you think these characters were impacted by these tragedies in their lives? Like Roland and her father and all these characters and their parents and their tragedies. What do you think? How did that alter their ability to grow and evolve as people?
Those hard questions again.
Maybe it like helps them to be more headstrong. I was thinking about how Roland says in this episode that she always thought that Starfleet could learn from her, and then Picard says, "Well, that's a trait found in some of the best officers in Starfleet I've come across, or whatever."
Yeah.
Yeah, like earlier I was thinking, like saying how like I thought there was sort of connective tissue thematically between like Roland and Tom Paris to an extent, and Kennelly and Dougherty. It was like that. I was thinking, well, that's all being written by Michael Piller. Like when this episode was on, I realized like the teleplay was all written by Michael Piller, and so much of his personality clearly was like written into the script. I even thought like there's a character that's referred to with the first name Jazz, and I wondered if that's the Michael Piller touch, because he was, he liked jazz music.
Well, the Michael Piller touch. What do you mean by that? That sounds interesting. Explain that a little.
Just because, like he likes to write in his own hobbies into the episodes and stuff like that, like jazz and like baseball and stuff like that. And I guess like all that, it was the same thing they did with the McKee, and they would have several episodes leading up to Voyager. It's like obviously like the start of leading up to Deep Space Nine. Even though it was in the 5th season, the Deep Space Nine wouldn't start until the 6th season of TNG. It's laying the groundwork for it.
Yeah. You got any thoughts, Jake?
Which
On what we've been discussing, or on my tough questions?
I think I did have a thought somewhere, but it kind of drifted away. So that was little bit time ago. So.
But you liked the episode?
I did like it. So I think episodes like this I would have had a little bit more trouble with when I was a kid watching, just because I wanted spaceships and spaceship battles. So this episode didn't have a whole lot. So I would think I would have had trouble with this when I was a kid. There were, and I think I enjoyed it, but it was just one of those episodes where okay, not a whole lot of those space battles happen. So, but it was so cool. But I don't know, being an adult, watching like, kind of seen all these episodes. I think a few times since I became an adult. So the space battle ones kind of interest me less, and some of the other stuff interests me more. It's just kind of interesting to see which episodes catch my attention now. But I know I always thought that was kind of Guinan's like observation of Ensign Ro being like having her like poles reversed. I thought that was always interesting. I was like, what does that mean? So did you kind of watch Ensign Ro, and it's like she tells Picard, it's like these people are defeated, I will never be. And you know, stuff like that is like all the she was like being like, I don't know, prickly or whatever. She was like trying to force people away, but at the same time, is like, as Guinan pointed out, it was like, yeah, she said in a crowded bar. It's like, so where is this person actually coming from? So
What do you think she meant, Dan Leckie?
It's a difficult question. Another one.
I'm known for that.
Well, I was thinking like I really relate to like seeing it through like a different lens from an adult perspective compared to like having seen it in childhood, and like it stood out to me like I clearly wouldn't have got like the fact, like the political machinations in the episode. I wouldn't have got as a kid, uh, and the point about the Cardassians actually staged uh, the the attack to make it look as if uh, it was the Bajorans that were responsible for it, in order to get the Federation on the side of the Cardassians. Um, that would have all been like lost to me as a kid. So glad to have understood that as an adult.
Yeah, well, as Garrick said, all of it is true, especially the lies. Cardassians are very much about lying. It is their talent, it is their passion. That's how they survive. They cannot survive without lying. It is their addiction.
So yeah, that's pretty interesting. I actually I didn't see that. So that's a good connection to draw. I did not see that connection at all between Garrick and what was happening in this episode. So I know it's interesting when you think about it was like one of the later episodes of DS9 where they were talking about what Cardassia was like before the military took over. So they were, from what was alluded to in that, I don't remember which episode it was, but the Cardassians were a very different people before. So.
Yeah. Well, everybody's a different people before they get involved in military and war, and then they lose themselves to that. And, you know, it's a very interesting thing that we're going to be talking about on Thursday. the remembering the sacrifices of battles and wars and remembrance and Veterans Day. We're going to be watching Star Trek, the original series, Balance of Terror at 6 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, Alberta time, and discussing that. So that'll be interesting. We can it'll be hopefully a totally cool discussion. And hopefully people will come, because most cenotaphs this year are virtual still.
Sorry, what did you say?
Most cenotaphs, where they gather at the little poppy statue and stuff, most of those are virtual still. So, because Jake, that's a very interesting discussion that I would really love to continue at that time. So can you, I would like, I don't know if you have all your thoughts together tonight, do you? If you don't, can you have that for Thursday?
Yeah.
Because I'm intrigued. I'm very intrigued. And I don't wish to assign homework, but I'm very intrigued by what you can bring to the table for Thursday. Yeah, and since are you all tired?
Me? Or,
Yeah, all of you. What is it, like almost 11 there?
Here it's like, I don't know, my clock's all weird. I think 8:48.
Yeah, and we're running out of things to talk about.
Yeah, I didn't remember, as I said in the chat, that Michelle Forbes has appeared in TNG previously. As Dr. Timothy's daughter in Half a Life. And I didn't remember that, like, she's actually allowed to, she's like, basically insists, like, if Picard wants her in the crew, then she will have her eating. So I thought that was cool by the end of the episode. And it sort of like bookends the episode in a way.
I think of that episode and I just think of the hair.
Oh yeah. Very elaborate.
Michelle Forbes' hair in that episode is crazy.
Yeah.
Does she actually wear the earring after the Ensign Ro though? Have you seen her wear it since?
She does, I think.
I think so. Yeah. And also, like, I kept thinking, even before we watched the episodes, and you were talking about, like, the relationship, the friendship between Guinan and Ro, and I always think about, like, their friendship as kids in, I can't remember the name of the episode. Rascals, yeah, thanks.
Yeah, but she never got to say goodbye.
I've got, like, the first draft script of Rascals, and it, like, went through a huge transformation in the writing of that.
How'd you get that?
Oh, ways and means. The city in order.
In the books, I don't know if y'all have read the books, Ro actually does eventually make it to Deep Space Nine.
Mm-hmm. In the relaunch novels.
Yeah.
And actually ends up with Quark, which surprised me.
Which is a bit weird, but it is what it is.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I was meaning to read those, but I never got around to it. And now that they're actually have stuff coming out after Nemesis, I'm not sure if I will. I don't know. I had to figure out that cognitive dissonance of, well, this is in the novels and this is on the
I collect the books just because they're Star Trek books and I have a shelf full. I'm an addict of books.
Cool.
Maybe it can be an alternate universe.
It could be. You never know. I mean, there's probably a bunch of Star Trek universes.
And basically, they're bringing it to an end, I think, with like the Coda trilogy of novels. No. Like the third one's coming out this month. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a billion alternate universes despite that, with all the fan fiction that's out there. There's a ton of fan fiction.
Yeah, I think I've read a little bit of it. I haven't really gotten that much into it. I know novel wise I read like tons and tons when I was in high school and things, but these days it's like, yeah, I just watch the episodes. So
Yeah.
I think there's a story. It seems quite big at like Deep Space Nine Millennium was done by Judith and Garfield Reeve Stevens, and that's to do with like an alternate timeline, I think. And with Ensign Ro, I kept thinking about how like she was intended originally to appear in Deep Space Nine, but then Michelle Forbes like turned it down, and then the character was rewritten as Kira and Reese.
Yeah. Yeah, Star Trek's really grown, and you know, it helps us to be able to get past our origins and what we've experienced there, and it helps us to be able to make something of ourselves despite what we've come from, and that we should be grateful for. Dan Leckie, are you tired? You look really tired.
Well, it's nearly 4 a.m. here in Scotland.
Oh my Lord, you need to go to bed. You really do.
where are you from?
Aberdeen, Scotland.
Oh wow, cool.
Yes, it is cool, but you need to go to bed. You do. I'm so grateful you stayed up to hang with us, but you need to go to bed and sleep.
I haven't really been. I've been suffering from insomnia. I know. After
Yeah,
leaving
but haven't
hospital.
you been ill?
Yeah.
So go to bed.
There's no point now. I've been drinking fizzy juice, so
Oh
that'll
my,
keep me awake. Fizzy juice and peanuts.
my
Stuff to keep
Lord.
you awake.
Oh my Lord.
But as I mentioned, I had to sleep before this discussion, so I had some sleep.
Is there anything else anybody would like to contribute to the discussion?
I thought it was cool the Cardassians already have Galley class ships, and like this is which is only like the second episode.
Well, Cardassians were very rich in everything before the Dominion War. Remember, they had hundreds of years worth of culture and everything else. If you look up everything on Memory Alpha, they occupied Bajor for a long, long time. And even after the occupation, they had all sorts of resources.
Yeah. And also I saw recently on, it must be later in the development of the Bajorans or Bajora, that like their symbol is established. I saw recently on Twitter that Michael Ikuda was saying that he based that symbol on the floor design of the temple in the DS9 pilot Emissary. So it must be like not till then that you see that.
That's amazing. You know a lot about Star Trek that I don't. That's awesome.
You do.
I don't, not compared to some. I'm learning, but I'm not perfect.
Quite a lot of that Memory Alpha article, like the history of the Bajorans and stuff like that. I've written quite a lot on like that page and stuff.
Well, I read it only because I'm writing a fanfic that I need to learn about that.
Cool. It's been a fun discussion. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome. I'm glad you could come.
Good to meet you, Jake.
Yes.
So yeah, nice meeting you, Dan.
Thank you all so much for attending this evening. I hope you got lots out of our discussion. Live long and prosper.